right, good evening, everyone. I'll call this Village Board meeting to order on Monday, July 16, 2018, and ask if you would please rise and join the Village Board in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Baldino.
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
Trustee Blackwood.
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
Trustee Sidor.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
Trustee Glasgow.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We've got 3 sets to approve tonight. The first is from the Committee of the Whole meeting from June 11, 2018. Are there any changes or passes?
Pass.
Passed by Trustee Baldino.
Move approval. Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Blackwood, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next are the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting from June 25, 2018. Any changes or passes?
Pass.
Passed by Trustee Scaletta. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Blackwood, second by Trustee Rosenberg. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And finally, the minutes from the Village Board meeting on July 2nd, 2018. Any changes or passes?
Pass. Move approval.
Second.
Passed by Trustee Sidor. Motion to approve by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And next, we move on to the approval of the accounts payable, and I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, President Hayes. I would move approval of the warrant register with a date of July 15, 2018, in the amount of $8,149,284.37.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee Glasgow. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Glasgow.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Sidor.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. There are no recognitions or presentations tonight, so we move on to citizens to be heard, and I have no blue cards at this time. Is that right, Becky?
That's correct. And on
Is
the
there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on then to old business. And we do have a couple of items to report out tonight. The first is a motion by Trustee Glasgow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I will move now, as I did then, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to the village staff that Section 8524 be tabled for further information, and Section 12-201 and 12-207, even though it reads 254 of the Arlington Heights Municipal Code, adopt the proposed amendments to those sections.
Second.
Do I need 2 separate motions on that?
The first one, actually, the 8524, you don't need a motion at all.
Okay,
The
that's fine.
motion that was made at the Committee of the Whole was to recommend adoption of the code amendments for the
201 and
sections.
207.
Yeah, that's it.
Beautiful. Okay.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to amend 201 and 207.
Adopt.
And is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Glasgow and seconded by Trustee Baldino. Can we have the staff just, for the audience's benefit, explain what these amendments are?
Sure. It's a simple amendment to include electronic smoking devices to those items that are banned for minors. Currently, we prohibit alternative nicotine things, and now we're adding electronic smoking devices to make it clear that all of those kinds of faux smoking devices are prohibited by minors.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And next, a motion to report out by Trustee Sidor.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I would like to move now to concur in the mayor's appointment of fellow Mustang Ryan Crane to the Youth Commission with a term ending April 30th, 2019.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Sidor, seconded by Trustee Baldino. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ryan, if you come forward to the podium, if you would. And raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and state your full name,
I, Ryan Crane,
having been appointed to the Youth Commission
having been appointed to the Youth Commission
in the Village of Arlington Heights
in the Village of Arlington Heights
in the County of Cook,
in the County of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
and to the office according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Ryan. We know you will. Look forward to it. And we do have a village logo pin to present to you and to have you wear proudly as an appointed member of this village board and of this community. So I know you'll wear that proudly. Congratulations. And then to make it official, if you would just sign your oath with our village clerk. So thank you all. And those are the only items we have to report out under old business. So we move on to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Any members of the audience who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to pass on consent legal A.
Okay, so noted. Any other no votes or passes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Glasgow, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Glasgow?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Sidor?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Blackwood?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Move on then to new business, and we do have two items to discuss tonight. And the first is planned unit development and preliminary plat of subdivision, including variations for the Hickory Kensington apartment complex proposal located at 4 North Hickory Avenue. Is the petitioner present? Why don't you come forward? If you just introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, good evening. My name is Guido Neri. I'm one of the members of the 4 North Hickory LLC development. I am also the architect for the project. Neri Architects, 444 North Northwest Highway, Park Ridge, Illinois.
Okay. And you have other members of your team here tonight?
Yes, I have with me Ben Pecoraro and Anthony Pecoraro. They're also members of the 4 North Hickory LLC.
Okay. If nothing introductory from the staff, we'll go right to your proposal. Go ahead.
Okay. What we are proposing is a, excuse me, a new mixed-use development at the corner of Hickory and Kensington, at the northwest corner. We are proposing a 76-unit mixed-use development with 3,450 square feet of retail space on the ground floor. The structure is a 5-story structure. Does this work right?
Use the other button.
I'm sorry. Oh, am I going the wrong way here? Wait. Oh, okay. Pardon me. The site is approximately 41,000 square feet, the site where the development will be. The actual site is larger, but will be subdivided into 3 parcels. The north parcel, which is directly adjacent to the Heller Lumber site, will be sold back to the village. There's a portion in the center which will be dedicated for the new Campbell Street right-of-way, and then the balance of the site to the south, which is what you see here on the screen now, will be the location of the proposed development. The development itself has 76 units, as I said. It has a total of 114 parking spaces, 86 of which are indoor on 2 levels, and there's an additional 31 parking spaces, outdoor spaces to the west of the building. Here you can see the basic landscape plan, which has been approved. We are also providing improvements to the parkway along Kensington and Hickory. And we've worked closely with village staff on the design of that layout as far as the parkway trees and the pavement and the recessed areas for curbside parking. Oops, wrong way. This is a drawing of the lower level, which shows predominantly all parking. There is a ramp feeding down into the lower level. Other spaces that will be contained in the lower level are the electrical room, mechanical room. Am I doing that? Oh, you're doing that. Okay, thank you. There's an elevator lobby in the lower level as well. There's some small area for tenant storage, lockers, but predominantly the tenant storage spaces will be located on the individual floors as we go up the building. The ground floor consists of a lobby off of Hickory. That's the main entrance to the residential portion of the building. There's an elevator bank, a grand staircase which takes you up to the second level. There's also a bicycle storage room located to the rear, trash room adjacent to that, and then to the south end of the building will be the retail commercial space, which will front along Kensington and a portion of it turning the corner facing Hickory as well. This is a typical floor plan of the floors, actually 3 through 5. What is not indicated on this one is on the second floor, there is a common area, which is a common amenity space for the residents of the building, which that space will include a fitness room, a party room, a community room. There will be an outdoor terrace for cooking and for holding social events. There's also a management office on the second floor as well. The balance of the second floor will contain residential units, and then floors 3 through 5 will be all residential. This gives you an indication of what the elevation would look like as you're standing, on the south side of of Kensington, looking north at the building. So you're seeing the southwest corner of the building, if you will. Building materials consist of masonry, some stone for accent, hardy panel systems. There's also aluminum cladding as well. Every unit does have a private balcony. The ones that are facing Kensington will be opaque in nature for privacy purposes. We feel that Kensington is the busier of the two streets. The balconies facing Hickory and facing the rear or the west of the building will be more transparent. There's another view from the south looking north at the building. As you can see, we have room to provide potentially 2 individual commercial spaces, or if the need be or the need requires, it can be combined into one larger space. This is a view looking west at the building. Gives you an idea of the color palette that has been approved by the Design Commission. We're using that red color as an accent, primarily to highlight the entrance to the building, and will also be the wall where the name of the development or the address of the property will be located. Another view from the northeast looking southwest at the corner. And where you see that white car, that would be where Campbell would be continued westward and improved up to the rail spur, which currently exists along the west end of the property and runs north-south along the west property line. So we are improving Campbell Street up to that point. And then in the future, as a development to the west of us, or the property to the west of us gets potentially improved, at that point Campbell Street would continue all the way to Douglas. I'm going to go back for 1 second just to talk a little bit about the structural type. The building itself is solid masonry from the ground floor up to the second floor. The first two floor levels, which is the ground floor level and the second floor level, will be precast concrete planks, and then above that will be 4 stories of frame construction. And this gives you an indication of the entire site. The current site consists of Lot 1, Lot 2, and that shaded area in between the two. So Lot 1 is where the development that I just showed you will be going. Lot 2 would be the vacant land that would be sold back to the village and land banked for future development as development grows to the north. And the shaded area would be the area of the site that we would be deeding back to the village for the Campbell Street right-of-way and improvements. And I think that's it for me. Is that correct? Okay. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, staff?
Mr. Enright has some additional remarks.
Mayor and Board of Trustees. Regarding the project summary, just to summarize what the petitioner is seeking, it's a planned unit development for the 76-unit mixed-use development on Lot 1. In addition, it's a preliminary plat of subdivision, as just shown by the developer, for 2 lots with the dedication of the Campbell Street right-of-way. There are several variations required for the development, which I'll get into in a second here. But basically, this is a PUD approval and preliminary plat. The developer will have to come through the process for final plat once they've gotten to that point in the process. As you can see here, the aerial, this north portion is excess land that the developer owns pursuant to the redevelopment agreement between the village and the developer approved a couple weeks ago by the board. The village will be buying back this portion of the property and using it for potential relocation of Mariano's employee parking, which right now is to the west of the rail spur line. The petitioner has indicated that they have this property under contract for potentially another development, mixed-use development. Staff has been working on a preliminary basis with Mariano's to potentially relocate the parking to this green area, but then also, if the petitioner moves forward with a second phase, there would be excess land here as well to the north of the extended Campbell Street right-of-way. This area is the approximate area of the new half street. Well, it's a full width street, but it would go halfway between Hickory and Douglas, terminating at the spur line. It would carry through again if the property to the west develops, and this is the development site itself. With respect to the overlay zone and the comprehensive plan, the village board adopted the Hickory-Kensington area plan in 2013, and that called for a revisioning of this area from its industrial roots over 100 years ago to mixed-use development to take advantage of its proximity to our downtown and the train station as a transit-oriented development. This particular project is very much in conformance with that vision. It calls for the street to come through, calls for 5-story building south of the extended Campbell, and mixed-use development with retail on the first floor, commercial uses. In addition, the overlay zone was established by the board, creating specific standards for this area, including height, no more than 60 feet. This meets it at 54 feet, and then various setback requirements, which this developer meets. We want to create something similar to the downtown, but on a much smaller scale, with respect to the buildings being close to the sidewalk, having nice, wide, ample sidewalks with street trees and a few benches, similar to what we have downtown. Density, this project meets the density requirements of 76 units for this lot, and that's what they're proposing. With respect to streetscape improvements, the petitioner alluded to some of the improvements. Of course, the major one is extending Campbell Street, stubbing it here at the railroad spur until such time as the property to the west develops. Then it can continue through to Douglas. There will be 4 to 5 additional parking spaces added at the north side of Campbell Street, more likely 4, to provide additional parking for the area. There will be a 10-foot sidewalk on Hickory that will bump out at this location near the intersection to 16 feet, also in front of the front door to make a nice entrance in front of the building, and also at the south end where you have the crossing at Kensington Road going east to west across Hickory. In addition, there will be a 10-foot setback of the building along Kensington from their property line. In addition to that, there's already public right-of-way here about 15 feet. So the building will be about 25 feet set back from the current curb line of the north side of Kensington Road. That'll also be landscaped with above above grade planter boxes and street trees, as you'll have the same thing along Hickory. In addition, the developer is going to be working with Commonwealth Edison to bury the overhead utilities. That was one of the goals of the plan. And in this area adjacent to the property, there's 2 or 3 poles that would have to be buried, subject, of course, to ComEd approving that. And that'll be part of the redevelopment agreement to funding covering that. Some of the variations required, one of the variations is for the right-of-way. The current right-of-way on Hickory is 60 feet, which is more than adequate to accommodate the existing pavement, which is 38 feet back of curb to back of curb. That allows 2 lanes of traffic, one north, one south, and also parking on both sides of the street. So that will not change. That geometric will remain the same. And then on Hickory, you'll have, instead of what's out there now, which is a 5-foot sidewalk, you'd have a 10-foot sidewalk from the back of curb to the building where the commercial is at the south end, and then there's about 6 feet of landscaping between the building and the sidewalk as you move north all the way up to the north end of the building. Typically, we require 66 feet of right-of-way for a subdivision, but because of the spur line on the western end of this property, it encumbers about 15 feet of the west end of the property, so there's no way to really shift this whole building over 3 feet to accommodate that, or else we would lose some of the sidewalk here, which is necessary to access the back of the building, including access to the bike racks and trash enclosures. So staff is supportive of that variation because there's no need to expand Hickory beyond the 1 lane in each direction. So there's no need for that extra 3 feet of right-of-way. Second variation, it relates to the sidewalk that will be installed with Campbell Street adjacent to the property. Typically, sidewalks are 1 feet off the back of the property line. The village and developer want to put this about 4.5 feet in this location away from the building. That allows us to landscape adjacent to the building to soften it so you don't have the concrete right up against the building. Typically, as I said, the code to require that sidewalk is in this location directly 1 foot off the property line, but we think it's a better scenario to have it several feet off to allow some nice landscaping that the petitioner will get an easement from the village in order to plant that and maintain it because it will be in the village right away. We think it's a better solution than having the sidewalk up against the building in this particular location. One of the other variations is pretty minor as well. It's the landscape island at the end of the parking row. We usually require 9 feet. They only have about 2.5 to 3 feet on their property, but there's an additional 4.5 feet within the village right-of-way indicated in green here. So there's ample room to do landscaping to screen that. They're also going to do a 3-foot-high decorative screen wall indicated here adjacent to the parking area to further screen it. So we think this will make for a nice aesthetic along this walkway as you move along Campbell Street from east to west. One of the variations interior is the garage. For the most part, the garage is 24 feet for the drive aisles, which is the minimum. There's a couple pinch points, one of which is here where you have the stairwell servicing the north end of the building, as well as the mechanical rooms over here. There's also a pinch point at the driveway down ramp to 18 feet. This is not unusual at all for parking garages that we've seen mostly in our downtown area because that's where we've had them. And our village public parking garages as well. So these are the types of variations that have been approved on other developments with interior parking. With regards to the loading space variation, the residential portion requires a 10 by 35 foot loading zone. There's no specific loading zone designated for the residential. However, the garage doors are going to be large enough to accommodate vans, not big semis, but vans, move-in vans, to come into the garage at the north end off Campbell Street. That will be the entrance into the grade level of parking. The entrance to the underground parking is through their private parking lot in this area. So it will allow some vehicles to come in here to do move-in and move-outs adjacent to the elevators. In addition, although the retail does not require a loading zone because it's less than 5,000 square feet, we do want to have the developer post no loading and unloading signs in this area adjacent to the driveway off of Kensington so that trucks don't block that road, that access into the parking lot. So we'd want that to be signed so that trucks pull further up in case they're making a delivery for the commercial or the residential. Regarding parking, the developer is providing the required parking for the residential, which is 1.5 units or spaces per unit, which is 114 spaces. That'll be in the garage as well as the surface lot. That'll leave 3 spaces left over for the commercial. Commercial is required to have 11, so there'll be 8 deficits, so that's the variation. However, as we've mentioned, there's going to be additional parking provided with the new Campbell right-of-way put in. There is a lot of use of Hickory, especially during the weekend evenings, certainly when the Knights of Columbus has events. We have a prospective brew pub that wants to go in that might generate some traffic too, as well as parking. But something that I want to point out, though, is the street parking survey that they did showed a total of 73 spaces on Hickory. The maximum usage was 42 on a Saturday. And these were pretty limited, admittedly. And then on a Monday at 44 and 10 or 11:30 in the morning. So a little more than half, about 60% were utilized. We recognize that at times that might even get higher when you have a big event at the Knights of Columbus, which is on Hickory, kind of at the north end or the middle part of Hickory. But what the study did not account for is you have over 160 spaces total on Douglas as well, 77 at the north half, 83 in the south half, which doesn't necessarily serve this proposed development, but certainly if there's overflow for any big events that might occur at the Knights of Columbus, there's an easy access through the end of the park here. There's a walkway that connects the 2 streets. So there's always that fallback option. In addition, Campbell Street will be extended here, as I mentioned, but also east of Hickory over to Beverly in this area. That's village right-of-way right now, and eventually, probably in the next couple of years, the village will want to improve that to have the connection between Beverly over here and Hickory. And that'll provide the opportunity for an additional 10 parking spaces on the street on the south side of the newly constructed Campbell east of Hickory. Regarding traffic, there is a condition of approval. The traffic study that's submitted shows that there will be no decrease in any level of service at any of the intersections, given the amount of traffic generated by this development and the existing roadway conditions and traffic volumes. The only concern, and we have a condition here to address that, is potential left turn movements off of Kensington into the driveway behind the building. There are times when westbound traffic on Kensington can back up during the rush hour and potentially block this driveway. So you could have a car trying to turn left at times and possibly blocking eastbound Kensington, although there is plenty of room here for a car to be out of the way because there's a left turn lane here. But if they don't do a good job moving over to the left, to the north, there's the potential for that. If we see that as a recurring problem, then we do have a condition of approval that the developer will have to put in a right turn, right out pork chop prohibition against left turns in. Don't think it's going to be a big problem, but in case it is, we have that mechanism. There are 15 conditions of approval as outlined in the staff report as recommended by the Plan Commission, who recommended unanimously approval of the project, as did the Housing Commission and the Design Commission. I won't read through those, but they address various items that we've talked about with easements and landscaping and future landscaping. For instance, if the spur line ever goes away, that would have to be landscaped by the developer at that time. That concludes staff's presentation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Enright. Mr. Neri, did you have anything in response to Mr. Enright's comments or the conditions for approval?
No, we've read the conditions. We concur. We agree with the conditions.
Okay. Could I just have you put up, well, that one's good actually there. I'm just a little concerned about the colors, the red, white, and blue. I don't want it to look like a big flag. Can just assure, I know the Design Commission recommended approval, so I trust them, but if you just talk about the colors, is it softer than I'm imagining?
Yeah, I think the contrast of that elevation is probably overly amplified. The colors are not going to be that striking, and I think they're going to be toned down a little bit. The whole idea behind the color scheme is to it's an attempt to break up the facade, and it's also an attempt to highlight the entrance of the building. When you look at the hardy panel color and you look at the aluminum cladding colors, those colors are very similar in nature. The change is really more in texture than color. So you're really dealing predominantly with, the 3 different colors, which is the red highlight that you see, the family of gray colors or silver colors, and then the masonry and the stone, which are going to be very similar in nature as well. So those are going to be the basic three colors. And I think they're going to be more, primarily more earth tone than they are going to be, as you indicated, red, white, and blue. I don't think they're going to be that brilliant.
More of a brownish red.
Correct, exactly. More like a burnt red, if you will, yes.
Okay. All right, questions from the board. Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Just a couple of quick questions. I mean, this is clearly a very modern-looking building compared to some of the buildings that you might see around town here, and it's a very nicely designed building. It's just different. It's different than the plain, simple brick buildings that you might see in other neighboring communities and so forth. So I think it's kind of neat that we have something new coming here in this neighborhood. You made a comment about balconies before. Can you go back to that slide, Bill, where they had the balconies on the north end, or no, south end facing there? Mm-hmm. So those are going to be enclosed, completely enclosed. The walls, the
Yes,
downside.
the walls of the balcony, yes.
What is it right behind those, the arrow where Bill is going, right? Go to the left, Bill. What's that?
Those ones are not.
Okay, so they're not all enclosed.
They're not all enclosed, yeah, my mistake.
Okay,
Yes,
I
they're
want to
not
make
all
sure I
enclosed.
heard you right. Okay, so
Yes.
not all of them are enclosed, but just those two banks of them.
Correct.
are. And what is the material of those balconies? What is that?
It will either be opaque aluminum panels or translucent glass.
So we don't know that yet? What did the design commission, what was?
I think it was the opaque, what they approved was the opaque aluminum panels.
Okay. All right. And when you guys do your marketing on this, and when you guys have done your planning and designing on it, is this what size are we talking about units here? What's your market? Are you going after young people, old people? Where are you at here for this? What are you going after?
I don't know about the age, or the target age, but I can tell you the typical size of units. We have studios that are anywhere from 550 to 580 square feet. Junior one-bedrooms, which is a studio plus, if you will, approximately about 650 square feet. One bedroom, 750 to 800, even up to slightly larger, 925, 950. And two bedrooms right around 1050 to 1100 square feet. So, if an older couple would like a nice, small, not an overly large two-bedroom, we're more than happy to accommodate.
Yeah, sure. No, whoever wants to write a check is good. I'm just thinking marketing-wise. Because it's a modern design and it's a contemporary look. Sometimes that says something about who you're going after. That's all.
I think if I had to give you an answer, it would probably be the younger market.
Yeah.
Young professional market that may be commuting to the city or working somewhere locally.
Okay. And then I have one last question. Bill, you alluded to this, the second half of this site to the west, that there was a contract that this petitioner has already, could you repeat what you said?
Well, the petitioners indicated that they have the property to the west under contract. That is owned by Alan Ladoff. He's leasing it to Mariano's for parking for their employees.
Yes.
So in order to develop that, the village has been talking on a preliminary basis with Mariano's in Milwaukee to relocate their parking to this excess land that the village would be buying.
Okay. And if that were to all come together nicely for you, what do you envision? What does your team envision for that half of the site? A similar building, would you say?
A twin building,
Twin.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was figuring. All right.
Yeah.
No further questions.
Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, can you show me where the trash for the commercial properties is located? The trash enclosure? Or is it inside?
You have an interior, is it?
It's an
At
interior.
the south end. It's hard to see here, but I believe it's right in here, right, Guido? The trash room?
Actually, if I may. It's right there.
Okay, and so it would be a common area trash room? Okay. And what type of, so it's about 3,500 square feet to 4,000 on the commercial?
3,453 to be
Okay.
exact.
Exact. So what are you envisioning? I guess I should say I saw a salon, I saw coffee.
We don't have a tenant lined up yet, but we're thinking something along those lines.
Okay, which makes sense for the building. So when I look at the parking, and I'm trying to understand this, Bill, what are the parking restrictions currently on the streets in that area?
Well, other than the normal village-wide parking restriction where you can't park overnight, there's no hourly limits. There's a couple, I think, unofficial no parking signs on this property where there used to be driveways. But other than that, we do get, I think, several employees parking there that work up and down Hickory right now.
Okay. So 3,400, 3,500 square feet of retail isn't a huge amount, but when you start talking about, a coffee shop or you're talking about salons, I mean, it takes quite a bit of labor to take care of those types of businesses. So I'm trying to figure out where those people are going to park. And you can go, well, there's plenty of parking. I showed you the parking grid. I'm starting to think about, well, what are we going to do down the road? What happens when this area is developed and there's only 3 parking spaces for these commercial properties? And I know that there was, in one of the slides, it alluded to the fact that maybe a lot of these people will be transit-oriented renters, and those spaces will open up. So if I own the coffee shop and there's one of I have 3 spaces that I can have my staff park in, but I have like 6 people on in the morning or in the afternoon or whenever it's busy, or even the salon, what's my incentive that I need to now rent spaces from you?
Well, I think any business would, they would look at, the incentives they would be looking at would be things like location, more of that rather than, well, do I have enough parking for my employees? I think there's ample parking, curbside parking around the property, and based on our traffic study and parking study that we had conducted by KLOA, they don't believe that we'll ever need 1.5 parking spaces per unit. Similar sites in the area have an average of 1.4 parking spaces per unit, and they're projecting our parking demand to be about 1.23 spaces per unit. If you take a look at our unit mix, we have an average of 1.3 bedrooms per unit. So they just don't believe that we will ever need 1.5 spaces per unit for the actual parking. The way we've done this in the past with other communities is that every unit gets 1 parking space as part of their rent. There is an additional space optional that you may rent as a tenant. Those are rented on a month-to-month basis. Some people like having an extra space, maybe in the wintertime if they have a second car. Other people don't. But those are normally rented out on a month-to-month basis. So we believe that even after the building is fully leased, there's going to be more than 3 spaces available for outdoor parking.
Okay. And so you have this outdoor parking. Are you then going to restrict it for your I'm just talking about the employees, because I understand what we're talking about with the customers, but how are you going to are you going to put up signs that say employee parking only, permit parking? How is that going to be controlled?
Well, any parking space that we would rent out would have normally a reserved sign on it.
Okay. So I would imagine we're going to see reserve signs all the way across there, correct?
If we rent outdoor spaces, yes. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And at some point when you you fill up the building and you're working on things, are you then going to, if I wanted to rent the salon and I wanted 2,000 square feet, and I'm going to have 8 spaces for beauticians or barbers, are you then going to include parking with their lease?
Well, we'll include parking based on what's available. 8 is probably a stretch, but
I'm just using numbers to make sure that my fear is that at some point you're not going to be able to just rent parking spaces, and you also need a tenant there, but you also need to make sure that the employees aren't taking up the valuable spaces for the customers, because they're not going to be a long-term tenant if there's nowhere for the customers to park to be able to go there. And it's real simple to say, well, the business owner will make sure that the employees don't park there, but
yeah, right.
we've all been there where we're walking into the store and you're walking past an employee to get in their car to go home.
Right.
All right. So since you're going to have this common area barbecue area,
Yes.
there are no barbecues allowed on the balconies, correct?
We haven't made that determination yet, to be honest with you.
Okay. But you know what our code says, correct?
I will find out if I don't know.
Okay. All right. Also made a note for staff. Seriously, kudos on the graphics. You guys are getting a lot better as you're going through it. I mean, it really does help to understand it by the way that you're doing the shading. So when we talked about the moving van coming into the building, is it going to be, so you talk about moving van and you kind of think of like a van, but I'm thinking more of like a small U-Haul. Is that going to fit in there?
I defer to the architect.
Yes, it will. Actually, there's the commercial space is about 13 feet high, floor to floor. The site from south to north slopes about 3.5 feet. So the ceiling height at the north end of the building in the garage is about 14.5 feet. So we're proposing to put a 12-foot door so you can pull in a moving box truck.
Okay. And so now so does he have to back in?
That would be the preferred way. I think it would be easier for them to back in because they would put the tailgate adjacent to the lobby entrance at the ground floor. So it's an easy move in at that point.
Right, because I don't know how they would get out if they pull in, right? I mean, I guess they could back out, but that seems pretty dangerous, right?
I've seen them do it both ways.
Okay.
I mean, they're going to have to back up for one way or the other. So
Backing in, well, that's right. I was going to say backing as you're going to do the job. It's easier to back in because when you're done, you want to get the heck out of there.
you want to get out.
All right.
It's easier to drive out. You're correct because just for visual purposes, because there may be pedestrians on the walkway, so it would be safer to drive out rather than to back out.
Okay. There was in our packet a construction staging. Without having to pull it up and everything, can you just kind of explain it? I mean, are we going to be closing off streets?
No, the Kensington and Hickory will have to remain open. There will be certainly there'll be staging on the parking lane adjacent to the site on the west side of Hickory, so that'll be closed off with fencing. They're going to be doing quite a bit of staging at the north end. We have not talked to the developer about the parcel that the village is purchasing, but it's just going to be sitting there. It's paved over right now, so there is the potential for us to allow that if we have an agreement with them. So there's ample room, but we will not allow a full closure of those streets. Now, would there be a time where they might need a closure of Hickory for a brief, half hour or something? I don't think we would allow that, but they haven't proposed that yet. So
Half hour, half a day, I'm all for it. I'm just not looking to see something closed for over a year
Right.
while a building is going up.
no, we wouldn't allow that here. There's too many vehicles that access this road for the businesses there.
There's a lot of vehicles that, forget it, go up and down the street that's closed forever. And I have two other questions. So, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but when you talked about the right-of-way that would continue through the parking lot across the street. I'm assuming that's Beverly Lanes.
Correct.
So would that reduce any parking in the Beverly Lanes? Because you talked about adding parking.
It would reduce, some of Beverly Lane's parking is within the village's right of way, so they've kind of been poaching there for years. But they don't have the rights because it's village right of way. The village just never utilized that for a street.
Well, it's benefited us all these years as it has then.
Correct.
Okay. Last question. You've said that you don't want to put affordable housing in this building. Is that correct?
Yes, we worked an agreement for contribution in lieu of the affordable housing, yes.
Why? Why wouldn't you want some affordable housing inside the building?
Well, it always comes down to financials.
Okay. Well, I think that, one of the main things that I as one member of this board need to encourage developers to do is change that perception that affordable housing somehow is a negative connotation, that it's Section 8 housing or they're less. No, I'm not suggesting you are, but I'm saying that people need to embrace the affordable housing element. And this is something I would hope that the board will take up at a future time, because if we have everybody just keep doing this in lieu of, and not kind of embracing the spirit and why it was created, we're going to have this war chest and we're going to end up having to build a building ourselves. But I think that the affordable housing sometimes gets a negative connotation where it's not deserving. And I'm going to vote in favor of your project tonight, but I would hope that you guys will reconsider and see if maybe there's, some affordable housing elements that could fit within your project, because I think that what I have seen on the north side where somebody did embrace it, you had a school teacher, you had a mechanic, you had different people who fit the criteria and aren't necessarily on welfare or Section 8 or anything like that. And so I think that you bring quality people into your development by doing that, and it only makes it a better development. But thank you for coming forward with your project. I'm supportive of it and wish you the best.
Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I want to agree with a couple things that Trustee Scaletta just said. The first, early on, with my concerns also about parking for the commercial space, and especially for those people who would be using that commercial space, because if they can't park, they won't come, and then the business goes out of business. So that's a concern. I also agree with what Trustee Scaletta just said, too, about concerns of making things more affordable. One thing I have to say I am pleased to see in this is that you offer studio apartments. Studio apartments come at a lower price point, and it's at least some opportunity for someone, likely a young person, who doesn't want to have a roommate, but can at least be in a very nice apartment near the train station in Arlington Heights, if that's where they work, or somewhere else where they're starting in. So I was glad to see that in this project, because we don't often see that in the things that come forward here. And then you kind of answered a question I was going to have about the junior one bedroom. It's not a term I'm familiar with, but you said it's basically a
it's basically a larger studio apartment where the area where the bed would go is actually more defined and more of a type of an alcove. It's almost like a bedroom without a wall and a door on it.
Okay, that makes sense. So I would like to say I'm pleased with that. You did mention that each apartment will have one parking space as part of the rent, so at least that's not an additional cost. What other things will be included in the rent?
Well,
Internet,
other than the
or
amenity areas that we're providing in the building, that's it. The utilities will all be separate. But we're providing a lot of nice amenities in the building for a building this size. We are providing a fitness room, a community room, an outdoor terrace area for community gatherings, or if one of the tenants wants to reserve the room for a private party, things like that. So we are offering some very nice amenities for what, the types of amenities that you would see in a much larger density type structure.
And the utilities will be primarily electric,
Gas, electric, yeah.
gas and electric? Okay. Let's see. And the parking spaces will actually be assigned, the individual ones that will come?
Yes,
So
everyone will get a
people don't
numbered
have to-
parking space, that's correct.
Okay, they'll know where they're going to park when they come in.
They have an assigned space. They
Okay. Okay.
have to be in their space.
Okay, thank you. That's really all I have. A lot of the rest was already covered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Neary, so there won't be any tandem spaces, it'll just be single spaces?
They'll be all single spaces, there's no tandem spaces.
Okay. So the 31, so you have 76 units, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, because in a couple places it mentioned 79, but I think maybe that was
an older
version.
proposal. Yeah.
So, so the 31 surface spaces, you said you'll rent out, then, because there are only obviously 76, one will be assigned to each one, so each one would have an indoor space then, ideally, right?
Yeah, each unit will be primarily assigned an indoor parking space. There's 86 indoor spaces, so there will be
10 extra.
10 extra. And then those additional spaces, whether indoor or outdoor, would be leased on a month-to-month basis.
So, let's say, for example, only 10 spaces are leased outside. So the other 21 spaces then will be available to tenants, to anybody who wants to park there?
Anyone who, needs them during weekdays, during business hours, potentially the commercial tenants would use them on the weekends, and maybe, visitors for the apartments. So.
Or, let's say, even potentially another business in the area might use that?
Well, we hope not, but, we can police that if we need to, but I don't know if there's going to be that. I don't know if I think I think we determine that if we see there's an issue.
Okay.
In the future.
So,
I mean, for liability purposes, to welcome other businesses, park on our property, I think there's liability concerns with that. So it's not something that we would really be inclined to do.
Question for you, Bill. If and when the brewery ever, let's say, decides to come there, where exactly are they going to be located, potentially?
Well, they have two locations. One's at 3 North Hickory, which is the first property just north of where Campbell Street will be, on the east side of Hickory. And then but they're just going to be manufacturing beer there on a small scale. Further up north at 19 North Hickory, which is across from Heller Lumber, is where they would be proposing additional manufacturing of beer, but also a tap room. But we don't have all the details yet on the size of that.
So we have no feel for what kind of utilization they would need for potential parking or anything?
Well, the tap room on a Friday or Saturday night, and they usually are late afternoon, early evening. They don't go real late in the night, like you would see with some restaurants and other establishments downtown. Their code required parking is around 40 for that tap room. So there's potential for quite a few cars to come if there's some sort of an event there. But keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, there's 77 spaces on Hickory. There's an additional 160 on Douglas. And then there's also parking on Beverly, as well as what I mentioned earlier about Campbell Street.
I'm just wondering if let's say that, like on a Friday or Saturday night, the Knights of Columbus has an event and the tap room would be going, there would be quite a demand for spaces, obviously, there.
Yeah, and fortunately, there's a lot of spaces out here as well on the 2 streets, and then Beverly as well, and so.
If I could, to Trustee Rosenberg, just to point out that there still are a number of zoning issues that would have to be resolved before we could consider either of those uses. And so I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves on that particular proposal.
Okay, I'm just thinking about, what's available there. From the standpoint of the snow plowing, so that was indicated that's going to be on the, yourselves as the owners of the building, you'll take care of the snow plowing?
For our property, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I think it was was it the front?
Yeah, the
area
front
right in
8
front of the
spaces
building?
off of
Front 8 spaces along
Hickory.
Hickory,
Okay,
which we agreed to. We don't agree to it, but we agreed to it.
I understand. I guess it's just with the type of equipment we have, it's difficult to get into those
Right.
spaces. I had the same question that Trustee Scaletta raised about the affordable housing. We keep getting more contributions in lieu of versus actual affordable housing being done, and so we're building up quite a nest egg there too. So I have visions, like you said, of us creating our own affordable housing building or something. So it's something I think we need to look at in the future going forward, and maybe it's for a future discussion we should have. But I like the concept of the building. I think it's a great building, it looks like, and thank you for bringing it. So
Thank you.
Trustee Blackwood.
Mr. Neary, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Neary, did I understand you to say that the property directly to the west on Douglas, or that fronts Douglas, is under contract?
Yes, we currently have that property under contract.
Okay, and I guess I heard you also say that you were looking to build a twin building that would probably create more like an apartment campus.
Correct.
Okay. Perhaps then just a comment when it comes to the affordable housing aspect, knowing that there are a lot of young people that are looking for affordable apartments, you might want to consider to have, instead of in lieu of there, you might consider to donate a few of those apartments for the affordable housing aspect of it.
We will take a strong look at that. In fact, we will even go back and take a strong look at this one as well.
Well, I think that the look of the building, the architecture, the location of it lends itself to nothing but positive outcomes, and having that affordable aspect to it would just blend everything nicely, at least from my perspective. But I'm very impressed with what you've done to date. It's taken a while, and I'm in favor of the proposal.
Thank you.
Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Mary.
Yeah, that's my wife, sorry. Slip of the tongue.
Maine.
I too am in favor of this project. I think it's an important project for this neighborhood and for the rec park area in general. A couple of questions that I do have. We talked about moving vans and residents moving in. Where are the commercial deliveries going to come in?
Yeah, that we did discuss that during the Plan Commission hearings, and what we determined was that since those deliveries would be, short-term basis, they would be short stops. We determined that the area to the west of the building, north of Kensington, right where the cursor is, that's where we would allow delivery trucks to stop and make their deliveries. We would post no parking signs for the first, was it 25 or 30 feet?
approximately to this point.
So that they don't park directly at, that close to the corner. But further in, we feel that that won't be much of a hindrance. If those parking spaces are leased out to tenants, for example, there's a very high likelihood that those spaces would be vacant during the day when tenants would be most likely at work. So, normally delivery stops are, short stops. So we think that would work.
Well, and I think that's an important point, that those deliveries would be in the parking lot and not on Hickory, because there are a lot of commercial trucks coming out of Heller Lumber during the day. And that street with all the parking and the trucks that are moving around becomes congested. And I I'm glad to hear that we're going to avoid making that issue worse. With regard to parking, I understand that the parking study says that there are a lot of open spaces, but I would like to point out that those open spaces are to the north on Hickory, closer to Minor Street. The parking spaces closest to Kensington fill up, and they're filled up for most of the day. So we're going to be pushing parking further north, and if there are spaces that are available, that's fine. But as future developments happen, I just like that to be kept in mind, that we're pushing parking farther north and farther away from this development. And then the last, so the village is going to own lot number 2,
Correct.
right? And then did I hear correctly that you're going to be putting in the street as access to the building?
Yes.
The Campbell Street extension?
Yes, we're putting in.
Yeah, the
street.
developer will be doing that pursuant to the redevelopment agreement.
Okay, right. Okay, so, all right.
But
That
the
was-
village,
that was
the
my-
village is paying for it, though.
The village is paying for the street.
Yeah. It's a public street, so that's part of the redevelopment agreement.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mayor, that's what I have.
Trustee Sidor.
Thank you, Mayor. Bill, can you show me where the front entrance is again on this? So where are the mailboxes, Mr. Neri, on that where the mail truck will be parked for probably 40 minutes or 50 minutes or an hour to deliver 76, people their
Well,
mail?
The mailboxes are in the lobby.
Mm-hmm. So where's the mail truck going to park?
Most likely, that would be the one truck that would want to pull up in front.
Okay. I hope staff is listening to this because we're going to go over this over and over and over again, the real life situation of living in a downtown area. Let's talk about the affordable housing, because I'm going to vote no for this, because there was a previous meeting where we talked about affordable housing. I believe Trustee Glasgow and I said we're kind of tired of fee in lieu of. And the only thing I have as a trustee is my vote and my philosophy about what we're doing. And the future is already here. You are the future. This building is going up. And we've had successful, affordable housing units, one just, being completed on the north side of the tracks. And I think the waiting list for that, I think, is quite long. So I just want to know why you can't put your affordable housing in here. I know you said you really didn't give us a reason. I'm guessing the reason is your pro forma says you'd rather pay the $275 or what have you. But what is the reason that you can't embrace the affordable housing?
Well, it is all pro forma based. Unfortunately, I don't make the financial rules. I have to comply with them. And, the building needs to, it needs to be valued at a certain price after it is completed. And
So is affordable housing a myth in our world? Is a village?
I don't know if it's a myth. I do know that, at the cap rate that buildings are evaluated at today, every dollar you lose in cash flow, is amplified at the value level of the building. So the system is flawed somewhere, whether it's with the financial institutions, whether it's with the affordable housing programs, I don't know. But, that's the unfortunate truth. I would love to, and I will go back and take a good, strong look at it, because I'm not crazy about having to contribute all that money either.
But
to-
you
to the
negotiated a
fund.
good, wait, hold on. You negotiated a good rate because you were supposed to pay, what was he supposed to pay? 800 and some odd thousand? But he negotiated it down, right?
Well, I think that was set more by precedent than my negotiating skills.
I mean, and I'm looking at a memo here that says now, if the village board approves the 25,000 fee in lieu of amount for the Hickory Kensington development, which is down from, 75,000?
Right.
It is also recommended that the Housing Commission recommend that the fee in lieu of providing affordable housing units as stated in the Arlington Heights Affordable Housing Rental Guidelines be changed from 75,000 to 25,000. We're giving developers less incentive now to put in affordable housing when I think the majority of this board is clearly yelling, let's have some affordable housing in this village. So for the only great project, I like the way it looks. I think that little area over there can be a little bit more modern than the downtown area. Like everything about your project except for this. And unfortunately, that's why I'm voting no, because that's all I have is my vote and my philosophy.
Understand.
But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mayor.
All right, Trustee Glasgow.
I kept quiet tonight because I talked a lot before. But I listened to all my colleagues, and most of the questions that I had were answered, with the exception of the affordable housing, which is a big component for me as well. I feel the same as Trustee Sidor. At what point do I have to start voting no on really great projects that would do wonderful things for the village in order to make a point to say, you need to put some more affordable housing in here? I understand finances. I understand the basics of procuring the building and making sure that you've got a reasonable rate of return with regard to that. I get all that. But at some point, we've got to end up having affordable housing. And I realize where you stand. You're trying to make money, and, you know, there's an equation. If A and B, then C. I get that. But likewise, I haven't made up my mind as to how I'm going to vote, because I think that the statement that we made as a board came while this was in the process, and you were kind of in the pipeline already before the dictates of this board during a recent meeting ended up coming down. I'm going to consider my vote as to whether I'm going to vote yes or no. If I vote no, understand it's not because of anything in the project. The project looks fantastic, and I agree. I think this is going to look great going in there. I think you got enough votes to pass, but I really do think that it's a statement that I end up making to say, hey, you and others, you come before us, you need to have some affordable housing. And that's just that. We've got to have it in Arlington Heights, period. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Well, I share the concerns of others about the need for more affordable housing, but I think your project is not the one we should enforce it at. I think, as Trustee Glasgow just indicated, you know, you and the Housing Commission and the staff were all going on prior precedent in terms of what's happened in the village in recent years. And so certainly I don't think you should be penalized for something that hasn't come to fruition yet in terms of a defined policy or an ordinance or something like that. So I will be voting in favor of it. I think it's a high-quality project, but as you've offered, certainly if you are willing to add an affordable component to this particular building, we very much appreciate that. And certainly take an even harder look if you do proceed with the second development. So, but I'm not going to penalize you for something that hasn't come to fruition yet in terms of an actual policy. So, I don't have any blue cards from the audience. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board on this item? Sir, if you come forward. Just give us your name if you would, please.
Daniel Hitting, 77 South Evergreen in Arlington Heights. I really have come forward because I need to lecture the board. If you want affordable housing, I think you have to take a close look at your building requirements, which are higher standard than most other villages, but take a look at them so that the developers can afford to put in affordable housing. If they are being dictated by your standards to do certain things that make it economically unfeasible to put in affordable housing, how do you expect the developers to do it willingly? They can't. They can't lose money. They go out of business. So I think the board's idea of affordable housing is good, but I think you have to look inward and say, okay, what are we doing that hinders affordable housing? One other thing. I live in a condo across the street. Please, affordable housing isn't just for young people, it's for the older generation. We have more older people in there than we do living alone, but we have more older people in there living alone than we do young kids coming in. Now, that would, of course, be because it's a condo and they can't afford it. But Incidentally, just remember, in this day and age, it's the older generation and those that are living alone that really need places. I know that the developer was quite surprised when they built this building because it was all about, oh, people can get on the train and go downtown and that. Over a third of the building were people who lived in Arlington Heights who were looking to get out of their homes, get rid of the yard work, but still wanted to live here. And so all of a sudden you had this influx of 60-year-old, 70-year-old people moving in that they didn't even expect. So when the marketing comes around, it's hard to say. You've got people in this town who would like to get out of what they're doing, and this is potentially a good opportunity for them. Thank you.
Thank you,
for your
Mr.
time.
Hayden. Appreciate it. Mr. Motto. Dr. Motto. George, just give us your full name, please.
George Motto, and I'll have to say I just happened to walk in, and I'm very pleased with this discussion on affordable housing. As you know, I'm chairperson of the ARP Livable Community Initiative, of the Senior Citizens Commission, and Northwest Community Healthcare just did a massive survey. The population of its service area, which is our service area, is going to be stagnant or drop, except for the senior portion, which is definitely going up. And so with the Senior Citizens Commission and the Livable Community, ARP Livable Community Initiative, we're going to have surveys and focus groups. What I've seen so far is that seniors especially want to live in place. They need affordable housing. This livable community is for all ages, not just seniors. We don't want to give that impression. So affordable housing for all ages is important. And as I said, I was very pleased as I sat back there and when the affordable housing did come into consideration, because we're going to be talking a lot about that. And so what I would ask the board to include that in an agenda, and as the gentleman said, we have to make plans, and I hope we can, our initiative can help the board make some real plans, because we are going to have an incredibly difficult problem in the next 10, 20 years if we don't act now. Thank you.
All right, thanks, George. Next.
Hi, Mary Beth Canty. I live at 612 East Euclid Avenue, and I hadn't actually planned to speak tonight, but I feel like I need to talk about the affordable housing here because I think it's really important that you guys consider it. I've heard a lot of things tonight that you are thinking about it, and that's important. I think it's important for you to do that without demonizing Section 8. It's possible to talk about affordable housing and bringing in a variety of people, young, old, all kinds of backgrounds. But if we don't draw a stand somewhere at some point, we will never get there as a village. My husband and I bought our house in 2009. We got incredibly lucky. And last year we redid our basement, not necessarily because we wanted to go through construction, but because we couldn't afford to buy exactly what we had in Arlington Heights. And I think that's a travesty for two people that work in pretty good jobs. We are not looking for affordable housing that is somehow limited in price, but it made me think that there is a detriment to people who are trying to come in to Arlington Heights, and those are people that we may actually want to get in here to help our kids, to help our community broaden its viewpoint. So I just strongly urge all of you to consider really taking a stand. I'm not entirely sure what you're waiting for because we do require affordable housing here. It's possible to not take a check in lieu of and say this is where we need to actually commit ourselves to creating some affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone further? All right, seeing none, I'll come back to the board. And who was it, Trustee Scaletta?
So I agree that trying to put this all on one developer in the middle of the project isn't, in my opinion, appropriate. And I think it's something that staff has heard loud and clear from the village board. I think that when I first brought it up, both of you were making notes. And as you did previously, and I think it's something that we need to talk about sooner than later, so that you have firm direction from the village board. I'm prepared to make a motion at this point to approve. My question has to do with the petitioner going back and reconsidering the affordable housing element of his project. And currently, there's an amount that's already calculated, that's part of the conditions. So what would happen if the petitioner came back and said, I've found a way to do it halfway, so that he's able to pay in lieu of for half of them, but the other 50% he's not. Does that need to come back before the village board, or?
Reduce it. It was based on the affordable need for 4 units, or based on the 15%. Any percentage, any number of units they make affordable would reduce by $25,000 their contribution.
Okay, so he wouldn't need to come back for further approval. He would only pay half. Let's say he did 50%.
He would only have to pay half.
He would only have to pay half as long as he proved it to.
Because that's based on the fact that there was going to be none. If there was going to be some, then the fee would go down accordingly.
Okay, I have my clarification.
All right. Were you going to make a motion?
I would move approval. I would move in concurrence with the Plan Commission recommendation.
Second.
Motion by trustee Scaletta, seconded by trustee Tinaglia. Further questions? Trustee Sidor.
Just to make sure that I have this straight, because in this memo for the affordable housing portion, as I read it before, if we approve this, then staff believes, or housing believes that we should change from 75,000 to 25,000. Is that something that's going to happen because we're approving this today, or is that just a recommendation?
That was just a idea that was presented, and that has not been.
It says recommend.
Right.
It's a recommendation.
Right. But the Housing Commission has had subsequent brief discussions on this, and they want to revisit the policy and make revisions to that and forward that to the board, hopefully in the next couple meetings. So at this point, the policy is $75,000 per unit, or a fee in lieu, or provide the affordable housing.
Or except if you negotiate it lower.
It's been a negotiated item with every developer that we've had, and unfortunately, it's gotten down to that number. But that's been accepted by the Housing Commission up to this point. But I do think that the Housing Commission certainly agrees with what we're hearing from the board, as does staff, that we need to push harder on the actual number of units being provided versus accepting the fee in lieu of.
Okay. And as Trustee Scaletta said, if they came back and said, we'll do half, I mean, I'd be fine with that. I'd be really happy with that. I think some is better than none. But I think the message from the board is clear. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, anything further? Trustee Tinaglia.
A couple of questions, a couple of thoughts. The speaker, it was Mr. Hitting that spoke before. From sitting on the other side of the table often on developments in different communities around up and down the railroad tracks, I would tell you that he's not wrong in his comments that he spoke about tonight. It is difficult. It's difficult for folks that I work for as an architect that to make these things happen. The costs to build these structures, it's hard to make the numbers work. But there are two ways that happens. One is building codes, and the other one are zoning regulations. It's possible that we as a board can incentivize these things to happen, not by reducing building codes or quality, but by reducing some of the zoning requirements. In other words, density, unit count, things like that, setbacks, so that a developer like Mr. Neri could come in and say, all right, well, I'm allowed 78 units. I can't build a less quality building. I don't want to build a less quality building, but if you let me build 80 units, I'll make half of them of the requirement affordable. These are the negotiations that I see happening again and again and again and again. So we as a board might want to be thinking about that in the future. How can we take advantage of what the reality of the costs of building these buildings are, along with the fact that we want to be sensitive to all groups, all ages, to be able to live here and do that. So everything that was talked about tonight is really important, and it's good to understand. That's just a little piece of it. Building codes are impossible. We can't change them. Most of them are national organized codes, but we can manipulate zoning ordinances that are local. So the number that I understand is 15%. 15% is what the required amount of affordable units would be. And in a case like this, 76 units, what is that, 10?
11.
11? So if you come back and say, look, I'm going to do another 76 units on the second building, you have to keep in mind that all of us up here are thinking about 22 units, right? But do you understand what we're saying, right? How will you do that? Or is it going to be 11 at 50%? And are you going to try and get 4 or 5 in this building and work it all out? You have to think about all that now. There's 2 other things I want to talk about the plan really quick. Bill, on this site plan that you have up on the screen here, to the right-hand top side, there's like a long, narrow space. What is that?
Those are 2 parallel parking spaces.
Those are 2 parallel parking spaces. Those are part of the, how many total?
Surface 31.
No, I mean all total parking spaces.
114.
114. How many, so the last question here is how many of those are going to be handicapped? I see 3 on here. Are
Yeah.
there more on a different plan?
There will be 3, which is compliant with the village code.
Okay, because I don't know if that's right, Bill. I think that it's more.
Well, we can double check, but our staff analysis says 3. So
All right. I think it's more like 5. But okay, so I was thinking that was handicap parking over there too, but it wouldn't make sense to put it over there. So, all right, that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay. Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. So I was going to suggest the same thing. If you can come up with some compromise, I think even if you put in 5 or 6 units in this building, I think that would be appreciated and helpful, as we were all calling for, and consider it for the other building. I think, and Robin, correct me if I'm wrong, the way this motion says, it says we're going to comply with the April 17th motion from the Housing Commission, which does have the 2 components in it, changing the 75 to 25 and accepting the
Correct.
the 25 from the developer.
It does.
So
if they offer up 4 affordable housing units, then we would reduce by $100,000.
no, but what I'm saying is we can't approve it that way because it's got a change in the amount of the 75 to the 25 across the board.
No,
No, it says here, we recommend that the fee in lieu of providing affordable housing is stated under the guidelines be changed from 75 to 25.
for this project, it was changed to $25,000.
No, it says if this is approved, it says that
But
it should be changed.
That motion only refers to this project.
that's correct.
Okay, are we
So, right,
sure?
it only refers to this project. That's all that's impacting for this. If ultimately the board wants to reevaluate that whole policy, that's a different story. This only relates to this project, going from 75 to 25 for this project.
Okay, I just want to make sure of that.
Mr. Ecklas.
I was just going to point out, I mean, first of all, I just want to say that the staff has heard the board loud and clear on this issue this evening, and as always, we appreciate strong direction and clarity. But in the board packet, either this week or the previous week, we did provide an outline for one of our business plan projects, which is a housing study, which is going to be conducted over this fall, working with the Housing Commission. One of the things that we're going to be looking at is the affordability of housing in Arlington Heights relative to needs in our marketplace. And I think that this conversation is very, very timely that we're talking about this, and some of a more robust review of some of these issues based on the board's interests can certainly be accommodated in that report. And I think that would be a good place to kind of tackle some of these issues, because Trustee Tinaglia stole a little bit of my thunder. He's 100% right. This is a question of kind of competing values and one where, you know, we can achieve one goal, but sometimes at the expense of the other. You know, we may have to give on building height or density in order to accommodate more affordability. You may have to deal with parking in a different way. All of these things interrelate because the property's worth what the property's worth. And, you know, we certainly can talk about those issues in a broad way. But just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I agree. And just to finish up on the affordable housing issue, I know we've got members of the press still here, and I'm concerned that the headline tomorrow is going to be Arlington Heights doesn't care about affordable housing issues. And that's certainly not the case. I think we've done a really good job through the Housing Commission, through the staff, through our boards, elected boards and others to do all we can, at least at this point, to provide as much affordable housing for a community of this nature as we can. I think the federal government requires us to at least strive for 10%. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone on staff. A level of at least 10% of your housing stock to be affordable.
Correct.
And so I think we've done a pretty good job of that as reflected in our reports to HUD and other federal agencies, and I think we've actually been lauded for our efforts in that regard. So I think the press should note that we can always do better, and I think the consensus on the board is that we should do better, but I think we've done a pretty good job to this point. So just wanted to note that for the record. So if nothing further from the board, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. There you are. Good luck to you. And I know you'll take the comments of the board to heart. So thank you. We do have one other item on the agenda, and that's the Christian Liberty subdivision to be located at 502 West Euclid Avenue, preliminary and final plat of subdivision, including variations. The petitioner present, come forward. Just identify yourself for the record.
My name's Anthony Ciccone.
All right. Anything from the staff before we have the petitioner's presentation? Okay. Why don't you proceed, Mr. Ciccone?
It's a pretty simple three-house subdivision that is currently part of the Christian Academy field grounds. I'm in contract with them to purchase a parcel of the property where I'm going to build 3 homes, as long as you guys approve it.
Okay. Are you in agreement with all of the Plan Commission conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Staff?
Briefly, there's variations for all the 3 lots for minimum lot width and size. However, they are consistent with the neighborhood, which has smaller size lots because it's the older part of town. This is an aerial of the area that's going to be subdivided. They'll move the equipment building here for some of the equipment they have for the track, as well as the long jump and the high jump pit there. This is just a visual of some of the trees that will have to be removed. They're in poor to fair condition. New trees will be planted in the parkway, and each new house will be required to go through the Design Commission for approval. This is an example of some of the lots in the area that are in the 50 to 62 foot, 78 foot at the corner, but these lots are all consistent with the neighborhood.
Okay. Anything further?
No, but I can answer some questions if you want.
Okay. Trustee Tinaglia.
I just want to point out, directly behind these proposed lots, it looks like we have 3 lots that are 51, 52, and 52. Or am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Are those 50s or 60s?
51, 52, 52.
Okay, so the 3 lots that you're proposing are larger than the 3 directly behind it.
Correct.
And they're even larger than the ones across the street from it on Ridge.
Correct.
All right, okay, thanks.
All right.
No
Trustee
further
LaBedz.
I wanted to get some more understanding about the stormwater part of it. In reading the materials, it's my understanding that stormwater is going to run off on the surface. Maybe staff, you can explain it. Mike, the reason I bring this up is my concern is that we've got an area here, even though we're only talking 3 lots, and I'm not really opposed to this project, but I don't want us to, these lots, there's a lot of green space there where water's getting absorbed, and I don't want these lots with, homes that will then start either creating flood problems on each other's lots or on adjacent properties, because that's something we get all the time, especially, well, not just in the neighborhoods with the small lots, but in, once something is done to change a lot, it changes where the water flows. So perhaps staff, maybe you could explain in more detail so I understand how it's going to go.
Certainly. I don't know if they have their engineer here who designed it, but it's a very flat piece of land. So there will be some sewers. Well, there's be overland flow of water into the street. So a lot of that water would be absorbed by the soils. In the back, in order to prevent any accumulation of water, there'll be piping system in the back, indicated by these blue dots, and then there will be a pipe that goes up to a dry well towards the front of the property that will additionally store some of the stormwater. On small subdivisions, we accept a fee in lieu of instead of detention, because in a case like this, you would have to use, you would lose a lot. So you'd end up with only 2 lots. So it'd probably just make sense to just make 2 lots out of it instead of 3 in that circumstance. But the overland flow of water then would eventually discharge directly into the street, because we don't want it going directly to the combined sewer there because of some of the issues in the neighborhood that are going to be addressed by the board as part of the overall plan for the village, at least the different neighborhoods that have these issues with flooding. So a lot of the flooding, a lot of the stormwater rain runoff will be contained in these pipes for a period of time until they get filled. And then absorbed, discharged into the front yards, and then if there's a lot of water, it would eventually go through an overland flow where these arrows are over the curb into the street, and then eventually into the system. But this type of infrastructure allows for a lot of the stormwater to be absorbed and then contained to a certain extent in this blue piping system in the well that's in the front, indicated by that red dot.
Okay, that part I didn't understand from reading the materials myself. So I appreciate your description about how some of it at least will go into pipe. So I would just hope that when the structures are designed, there will be some emphasis maybe put on other ways to help manage water, encouraging rain gardens and so forth, so that we don't have some of the issues that we keep hearing about over and over again. So that is primarily my concern with this. Otherwise, I have no problem with the subdivision of it.
Trustee Scaletta.
So I too have concerns just with the engineering part of this, and I'm no engineer, but my concern is that are all the other homes in the area, are they all hooked up currently to the combination sewer or the combined sewer?
I don't know factually if they are or not. I would think that they would be, but I don't know with 100% certainty.
If it's a combined sewer area, then they would have to be, by definition, hooked into the sewer system, which in that neighborhood is combined.
Right.
Whether they have overhead sewers, we can't really say.
Right. And I appreciate that at least there's a sewer in the backyard, because I was worried about the people that live behind. So let's not just talk about the house to the north. As people, even people that have homes that are 50 years old, all of a sudden they keep tinkering with their landscaping, and all of a sudden water is being diverted in different places. So I guess the concern is, especially with the home that's existing that's just to the north, do we just have to rely on, they come with a plan, we approve the plan gets approved, and just hope that the homeowner doesn't do anything to negatively impact the neighbor to the north?
They would have to get reviewed by engineering, and engineering isn't going to approve a plan that they're gonna want the site graded to make sure the water goes where we want it to go.
And this plan that it's on the board right now shows the grading, so it has to be graded so that the water does not go off onto the other adjacent properties, and that's double-checked again when they come in for building permits, and engineering thoroughly reviews that. Now, you're right, things happen down the road. People change the grade of their property, and they're not supposed to do that without a permit, and then we get problems, and they have to rectify it, so.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a great use for the property, and I'm supportive of the plan. I'm just a little bit nervous that, we're kind of deviating from the plan, that these 3 lots wouldn't be hooked up to the combined sewer. I realize that the system is kind of taxed, but I'm wondering, what's the impact one way or the other of whether these homes are hooked up to the combined sewer or not?
We'd have to discuss that with our engineering department, but this is their recommendation based on the issues with the combined sewer in the area.
Again, remember, if you're in a combined sewer area, every house is connected to the combined sewer. That's where your water goes when you flush the toilet or whatever. And if they're new homes, they have to have overhead sewers. And so they'll have overhead sewers. It's more the other homes in the area. The real issue is how the site is graded and making sure that the water is not going to be going more into the neighbors' yards than it already is. And that's generally the standard, is to make sure that you're not directing water with the design of the project more towards the property than the water already is going. If this area had a big downhill slope, to the north, that water's already going that way. But what I'm hearing is that they're pushing this water more towards the street, which is much more manageable from our standpoint.
Whose idea was this to not hook up to the combined sewer?
That was, I don't know if the developer originally proposed that, but that's certainly engineering's opinion, so that may have evolved through your conversations.
I did propose that at first. It just happens to be that I'm a sewer contractor, a local sewer contractor, and that was the original game plan. We had proposed it, drawn it up, and brought it in, and engineering said that they didn't want any more stormwater coming into the system currently, that there was plans down the road to increase the amount of water that can flow through the pipes, but it's not intact right now, so he wanted everything to go, engineering wanted everything to go in swales on the top of the surface of the earth, and my engineer that I hired thought the drains in the backyard coming to the dry wells that are proposed, the red dots in the front, would be a better solution because we won't get any soggy grass. And so there's low points, and then the water comes to the surface in the front, close to the building, with a lot of grass area to kind of eat up the water, if you will, and roll over the curb line if it doesn't get absorbed into the earth by that point. So we did try to tie into the storm sewer, but this is how they wanted it.
Right, and again, what's going to happen is the water is going to go over land. Instead of going directly into the combined sewer system, it's going to go over land first. Some of that water is going to soak into the ground, evaporate, what have you, but eventually, when it goes down the street and it goes to a storm drain, it's going to go into the combined sewer. You're just losing some of that water along the way, and that's the idea.
Okay. And the property owner will be responsible for the sewer line from the backyard to the front?
Yes.
Yeah, it was clearly pointed out by engineering that I had to label it as private sewer. So each of the 3 lots has a private sewer that they'll be, each homeowner will have to maintain their own private sewer. So, yeah, it's a private thing.
All right, I'm comfortable. Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Trustee Rosenberg.
So will these private sewers have like inlets where all the water will drain into and then flow down? Or it'll be more like a French drain type thing with holes?
Well, there's gonna be a drain with a grate where water's going to flow in the rear yard, the blue dot in the backyard. And then the water is designed to push towards the front of the property to the red dot. And then only at times where there's heavy rainfall will the water raise up at the red dot, spill over, and actually meet the surface. But it's actually designed to go to the red dot as a dry well that it's a cavity of hollow space that will hold a number of gallons. And the thought of it is that it'll disperse into the ground. But yeah, there's going to be drains in the rear yard to answer your question. And then the dots in the front yard are more of a spillover system, not where water's coming into it, but actually getting out of it.
Okay. More like the ones that have a cap and it flows out once the pressure gets high enough to release it. Okay, thank you.
All right, Trustee Sidor.
Very quickly, I kind of like this plan instead of it going into the sewer. So it's just like our backyard stormwater plan, right? Except we're not going all the way to the sewer line. The drain's going in the back. So here's a perfect example I was talking about a couple of weeks ago where engineering or building or whoever does that final inspection of that landscaping or that grading has to go out physically, not just look at the plan, and make sure that before this gentleman puts his sod in, that those properties are graded per plan, and that water's going to go that direction. Am I right, Rich? Say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's just to let you know. We discussed, what really happens when someone builds an addition or what have you, and grading tends to change, and water tends to flow in directions that it really wasn't intended. So as long as the grading is good on this, I think it's kind of a neat plan until we can fix the sewers or make the sewers larger. It's something. So that's my only comment, Mayor. Thank you.
Anything from the audience on this agenda item? Seeing none, what's the will of the board?
I would move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Glasgow. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Good luck to you.
All right, thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
No other new business. Any report from the village manager?
Nothing further this
Right.
evening.
Petitions and communications. Anything from the board? Trustee Glasgow.
I would just remind the citizens, it's nice outside, get out and walk Arlington. Mr. Reckless, we've got another batch of signs coming out at some point?
Very shortly. We just approved the next 9 locations based on the work of the Walk Arlington Committee, which is with representatives of all of our different area taxing bodies, trying to serve school kids, shopping areas, the library, et cetera. So those should be coming up any day now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
And again, thanks to the Park District and the Historical Museum for another great Irish Fest over this past weekend. We can all catch our breaths a little bit before the main event and taste the first weekend in August. So hope to see everyone at the best downtown block party anywhere in the Midwest. So enjoy these couple of weeks. Anything further? Seeing none, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
By Trustee LaBedz, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.